Hello everyone, and as always, welcome back to my channel. Or if it's your first time, welcome to my channel. My name is Marlene and I talk about eating disorder recovery and everything related to healing the relationship with your own body, with food, and with movement. And today I want to talk about emotional eating. I recently got quite a few messages about the topic, and I just want to give you my twist on the topic and why I don't think that emotional eating is a bad thing, but also when it can become something more than that. So let's dive right into the topic as we always do. Instead of starting with a definition of emotional eating, I want to talk about what emotional eating really is. Because if you look at a lot of definitions, they will actually tell you that emotional eating is solely using food as a distraction for stress or to suppress your emotions, which it can be part of that, but also emotional eating is way more. Every human being eats emotionally sometimes, whether you have certain foods as traditions, whether you like to get your favorite childhood food when you're down just to like get a little bit of comfort, whether you're on your period and you're craving certain foods and you just feel like I want to eat those certain foods, they make me feel better. All of these things can be considered emotional eating. And also, sometimes for instance, when I have a super stressful day, all I want to do is to have some comfort food. And the term comfort food, for some reason, is not as negatively negotiated as the term emotional eating, when it literally is the same. Emotional eating is something that we all as human beings do. And the reason why I don't only think that it's not bad, but I also think that it's important is because it is part of our emotional experience. Meaning, as I said before, when you have like certain foods that you remember from your childhood and maybe you miss home and you're making those foods, they give you a sense of comfort. They give you a sense of nostalgia maybe. And those are not bad things. All of our senses work in that matter, whether it's a certain smell that reminds you of something, a certain sound that reminds you of something, sometimes even the surface when you touch something, and our taste buds, which is, a big part of eating and of the eating experience, play into that as well. So emotional eating overall is not a bad thing, and I'm very, very glad that more and more content creators, and I can actually show you some over here that talk about the topic and some dietitians that talk about the topic and talk about why it is so human. I'm very glad that these people are coming out more and more, because otherwise it kind of creates that idea that you should always eat perfectly, and then we're kind of going towards that really toxic direction again, where food has to be perfect. But then the first question is, what does perfect mean? Who sets the standard for perfect food when it is something very individual? But also, of course, that's just another way to sell you courses to go against your emotional eating, or to sell you certain protein products that won't make you crave certain things, when it's really not how that works at all. So it's really nice and refreshing to see more and more dietitians who come out to talk about the topic and to talk about, again, why emotional eating is not a bad thing. And again, if we think about it, even choosing what you crave in a moment. Of course, that's your body communicating with you oftentimes, but that's oftentimes also emotions. Normally, it is a combination of these things and sometimes even more things. When I am truly listening to what I want and what I'm craving in a moment, normally part of it is probably that my body craves certain things or needs certain things, whether it's protein, in my case, it's oftentimes carbs, fats, but it oftentimes also has an emotional component of what I'm feeling like having that day. So again, just like taking out the heaviness out of the topic can be really helpful to understand that emotional eating overall is not a bad thing. It's very human, and it's nothing that you need to avoid, because you probably can't avoid it, because we all do that to a certain extent. Yes, there are people who tend to eat a little bit more emotionally, and I would actually consider myself one of them, because if I'm in a certain mood, I was always a chocolate person. I need something chocolatey. My clients will know that. Or I will, I have my little ritual of having a little pastry in the afternoon, or, all those things. Now, if you ask yourself, but where is the line, or why does emotional eating still get such a bad rep? I mean, part of it is that I think it's completely misunderstood, and it can also be, a huge part of capitalism again, and of like selling you products, courses, and so on. On the other hand, emotional eating and binge eating can sometimes have a little bit of a blurry line. And even with binge eating, I even know a dietitian, I'm going to blend it in right here again, who really says, like, I am binging one time a week. I'm like actually binging, and I'm not having binge eating disorder, but here are my reasons, or here is what leads to that. But she doesn't see it as a bad thing. So even with that regard, there's a little bit of some wiggle room, I would say. At the same time, binge eating disorder is an eating disorder, just like any other eating disorder. And the three biggest components when it comes to binge eating disorder is, on the one hand, restriction. That is actually one of the ones that I see for the most, like people restricting, and then their body's response is to binge and to like get more food in, when actually the restriction is the problem and not the food itself. Habituation, meaning when it becomes a ritual that makes me feel very, very comfortable, and I don't really have any other ways of coping with my day, with my emotions, or any other rituals that help me, that can play a part too. Normally, just to edit in here, it's a combination. Like, habituation is oftentimes, for instance, connected to the restriction, or also, and that's the third big point when it comes to binge eating, to suppressing your emotions or to not having other coping mechanisms to cope with your emotions. The interesting part is, most people I have ever worked with that struggled with binge eating still had some component of restriction, whether it was mental restriction, whether they would beat themselves up for what they ate, whether they were over-exercising, whether they had a history of restriction, and so on. So oftentimes it really makes sense to look at all of these together and to not only blame the habituation or the emotional suppressing for it, and to also see what other emotional layers are under there. Again, my clients will know that I always annoy you guys with self-worth, with underlying beliefs, with trauma, with all of these things to like take a look at and to really understand what are the things that really lead to that. So I would say, as for the line might be even somewhere different for everyone. I sometimes have days where I'm just extremely tired and my body is just really hungry and I'm, eating a lot of food, and maybe somebody would consider that a binge. I wouldn't consider it a binge, but the line is very, very blurry. And at the same time, when it is something that you can notice becomes a habit, you plan your day around it, you have issues to cope with your emotions any other way, you don't have any other things in your life like hobbies, like friends, somebody to talk to, those can all be warning signs. Not warning signs that you are doing something wrong, but warning signs that you might want to look into those areas of life. Can you add some things to your life so that you feel like you have more hobbies, you have other rituals that don't include a binge? Can you work on your self-worth? Can you work on the underlying beliefs? Can you work on like really giving yourself the allowance to heal, the permission to heal, not only in terms of healing your body, but healing your mental state and healing all those wounds that are there. So again, emotional eating in itself is not a bad thing. It is very human and we all do it. And even the line to binge eating can be a little bit blurry. If you are more interested in that topic, I can also make more videos specifically about binge eating, because that was like a very, very, we touched on it on the surface, but there's so much more that goes into it. I also have a very good friend who's a recovery coach and an expert in binge eating. So if you would like me to invite her on the channel, we can totally do that as well. I love her approach. I love how she has like an anti-diet approach. So yeah, let me know in the comments and I will see you in the next one.